Hi everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. If you're new here, you are very welcome, and we have loads of videos about all sorts of different embroidery and textile art techniques. So do have a scroll through on the videos tab and see if there's anything interesting that catches your eye. If you're a regular, you'll know that our Sunday videos follow Winging It. Now, this is a textile art project that I run each year. We've made a book, we've made a garden themed quilt, and this year we are making a wall hanging or a sort of decorative quilt built out of panels that reflect things that are happening throughout the year. I will link the playlist at the end of the video in the end card, so stay tuned for that, and there will be a quick link to all the videos for all the projects that we've done so far. Last week we started our July panel and I used a technique that I've not done before on this channel, and that was batik, and we use various household items to create a wax resist to create a scene from a holiday or a favourite restful location. And this week we're going to start the process of stitching on that and embellishing it. So you'll need some just simple embroidery threads, a needle and a pair of scissors. I'm going to start by adding my wadding to the back of my batik background, and then we'll take it from there. So gather some bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
This is where we left things last week. We did our at-home batik using candles and watercolour paint, and this has dried now and I'm really happy with the depth of colour. I think there were areas where I rushed. I didn't probably let the wax dry enough before I started painting it or setting off, and so I did get quite a bit of bleed, particularly in the landscape. So I took far more time over the water and I'm really happy with the way that came out. The rocks were fine, but this area of landscape I went too quickly and rushed, and so as it's dried and I've looked at it through the week, it is quite sort of blotchy, and so we are going to have to do a little bit of work to tidy this up. Been thinking quite a lot about what to do with this. I want this to be a really sort of gentle, slow stitch piece because I think I'm going to be doing some of this on my holiday, and I think it's going to be quite a nice one to take away. So if you get your background done, this would be a great one to do on a train or in the car, obviously not while you're driving, or on a flight or by the pool or sitting out having a picnic somewhere. I want this one to be not too complicated and with not too many things to add. So I think I'm going to add some beads to this. I think that will be quite nice, but I've got lots of these little tins. So this is some mints. These I bought from Flying Tiger, but if you've got any little mint tins, these are great for transporting beads around in your luggage or in your handbag or whatever. So always keep little tins like this because they come in really handy. So you could gather together a selection of beads, and if you are taking this away with you, this would be a great way of taking your kit. So I also thought this one would be a lot of fun to play around with a very particular kind of thread, and I think holidays are all about ease, aren't they? We're not following a schedule when we're on holiday, so I thought a good way of representing this would be through variegated threads. With variegated threads, the dyes blend from one to another, so you can see that we've got two different shades of green there, and if we go a little bit further we get into a much more sappy yellow green, and then a little bit further still and we get into a very pale green. And there's an ease because they sort of fade, it's an ombre effect, because they fade from one colour to another. There's an ease in that, and I think it's really reflective of that way that when you're on holiday, your breakfast time blends into your lunch time, which blends into your evening, and we're not following such rigid structures. So I thought ombre or variegated threads are perfect for this. So I've got a little box of variegated threads. I just wanted to talk you through some of what I've got and what I would recommend. So if you don't have variegated threads, if you watch our 1st January video, we actually painted some thread. So we just used a white kind of weft thread. It was a cotton thread, but if you had just some white embroidery floss, it is 100% cotton. If you're using Anchor or DMC or Madeira, it's 100% cotton and will take colour really well. So you could make your own variegated thread if you wanted to. But these are some of the brands that I really enjoy using. So DMC are great. They've got a really broad range of variegated threads, and they've got different types of thread in that range. So this is their standard variegated. So they also do these colour variations threads, and these are often themed, so they are given theme colours. So most of these are wound onto pegs. This one is shade 4145 and it's called Sand Dune, and so it's variegated in sandy beige tones. What I really like about these is that the variegations come much more quickly. So if I take this piece, which I've already used, you can see that just in that little maybe 40cm length, you've got the full range of the colours. So the colours change maybe every 6cm or so, and that means you see the variation much more obviously in your work. So they're standard variegated threads, like that green one that I was just showing you, which I now can't find. Here we go. They're standard variegated threads. There's much more thread before the colour changes, so we've maybe got 10cm or so, maybe even longer than that, getting on for 12 or 15cm before the colour changes. So it's worth really thinking about which type of thread you're going to use. So we've got DMC standard variegated, DMC colour variations. Anchor variegated threads though are different again. They have very gradual transitions. So I've got a piece here that is, just measuring it, it's probably 80cm long, and we've only just got the full range of colours. So you've got maybe 20 or 25cm of each shade before it transitions into another colour. So you get a much more gradual blend with Anchor threads. So that's another range that you can have a look at. They have got some lovely colours, particularly I really like their greens. There's some gorgeous green variegated combinations. They also have some nice pink and red ones. So another range that I really like is Cottage Garden Threads CGT, and these are available online. They are an Australian company, and they do beautiful colour combinations with great names. So this is called Pantoufle, and it's golds and yellows. It's a great one for stitching sandy landscapes. I really like this one as well. This is called November, and I think they're dyed in small batches. They're all hand dyed threads. They are not cheap. This one is called Pistachio, kind of giving away all my favourite colour combos. So this is it's similar to this one from DMC, but much more intense colours, and it's more of a sort of lavender colour, more purpley than the DMC, which is definitely blue. I've also got this one, which is Viola. It's gorgeous deep purple colours, and again with these the colours change quite quickly, so you get a really good sense of the variegation. So that's Cottage Garden thread, so let's pop those somewhere else. Now Anchor also do some beautiful variegated pearl cottons, so we've got a lovely sort of candy coloured one here. They do quite harmonious blends as well. If you want shades, this one is shade 1335. This one is shade 1325. There are labels inside the tube with the colour number on, so they do quite harmonious variegations as well. There's a green one. I've got quite a few of these. You can get packs of them fairly easily online. That one the labels come out of. So there's lots of variegated pearl cottons in Anchor's range as well. I think DMC do some as well. There's also a brand called Wonderful. These are a bit more pricey. They are beautiful to stitch with, and they have some gorgeous colour combinations, really unusual. So this is a blue-green one. This one is a really nice sort of bright mixture, red, pink, green, blue, those sorts of shades. I've got this one that I haven't used yet, that's purples and greens, and that one again is a really unusual mix of colours, so really enjoy stitching with those. And DMC also do some lovely pearl cotton. This is a really fine, I think this is 12 weight, and that is, they come in these cute tiny little balls, really nice mixtures of colours there again. So that's a reds and pinks one. And then there's a brand, I've only got this one of this brand, I just bought it as to see what it was like, and it is an absolute dream to stitch with. So this is a 16 weight thread, and it's by Finca. It's a Spanish pearl cotton. They are beautiful threads, and I bought this from a company called Make It of March. I think their situation is changing, but if they've still got a website, I will link it in the description below. They've got a huge range of these threads, and when I bought this, I was told that this is one of the best thread companies in the world. It's often used in lace making, like needle lace, so that's a really nice brand as well. And then finally, this is that I've got a lot of variegated threads. I've got a bit of a weakness for them. These are from Sulky, so I bought these as a pack. I feel like there's one missing. I think there's another one that came in the pack with just some gorgeous, again, gorgeous variegations of colour. These are 12 weight cottons, great for quilting actually. Got a lovely sort of multicolour blended variegated thread. So a huge range of variegated threads, and you might be really familiar with the DMC and Anchor ones, but if you dig around online, there are lots of companies that do some beautiful and interesting variegated threads. I hope that's helped sort of open up the world of variegated threads to you, and I'm going to pick out some now that I think are going to work well with our scenery. Okay, so I've picked out a bit of a bundle of threads. I wanted some beiges and browns for the rocks, and so I've picked out an Anchor and that DMC sand dune for down here. Then I wanted to create a bit of life on the sand, so I thought the pantoufle from Cottage Garden Threads, and thought we could have a go with this sulky thread on the sand as well, just to brighten that up. Then I want something for the foliage in the background, so I've chosen this DMC, which is 4045 for the trees, and then I thought we could blend in some bits of these two for the maybe the bushes along the background or the horizon. So I've got this wonderful green blue blend and an anchor kind of olivey sap green blend, and then we won't use these this week, but I'm going to use a combination of these two for the sea and the sky, and I may bring in something like this. So this is 4030 from DMC. That's a really nice watery one as well, and I quite like this one, although it's quite bold, so I don't know. This is Anchor 1347, so lots of different blue shades in there. Might be able to use that as well just to liven things up. So I doubt we'll do the blue today. I thought we could concentrate on the rocks, the sand and the trees. So that's what I've got, and I'll keep you posted on which thread I'm using at each point. Now, we did this back in January, but I'm just reluctant to just go for it on this one, particularly because I want it to be a relaxing experience for my holiday. So I don't want to start stitching and then discover that I'm not happy with it. So when I feel like that, I think it's always good to plan before you start. And back in January, I suggested doing a copy of your work. So I've just done this on my inkjet printer, just literally put the piece of batik on the flatbed and pressed the copy button and have printed it out, and I can then do a little bit of planning. You can do it with a pencil if you want to. I've just got a black pen and sketched on it, and I thought, let's keep this to slow stitch. So rather than trying to embroider specific things on it, maybe we could just create some textures on the different parts of the image. So I had a bit of a play around, and I thought, what stitches create the right texture for each section? Thought seed stitch would work really well on the sand, so I can just put some marks in to give me a sense of what that will look like. What about if we did just clusters of French knots on the trees to just suggest that they are bushy and have got leaves on them? Wanted to create some roundness on these rocks, and thought that maybe some blanket stitch wheels might be fun on here, and so I can just roughly sketch those in. This is going to be quite abstract, but I'm hoping it's going to be quite therapeutic to stitch. I want something textural and leafy, so we could maybe put some chain stitches on the bushes just scattered around. What I don't want to do is do so much stitching that we lose any sense that this was ever a batik. So I just want to be sparing, and I think if I stitch like this, I'm not going to cover up that watery, blotchy texture on the fabric. I'm just probably going to enhance it. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep this handy and be able to refer back to it. So I think I'm going to start with the sand. It's the most straightforward section, and I just wanted to show you how to deal with Cottage Garden Threads. They come in a twisted skein, so when you get them, I wish I had a new one to show you, but I've used them all. When they come, they're kind of twisted around like this and in a loop. So they come, when they come, they look a little bit like that, neater though. And so what you do is you get the loop at the bottom and just pull, and it will unravel like that, and you then just leave it in this pack. There are instructions somewhere. They come with instructions on how to use them. They're pre-cut strands, so all you do is just take the end of one, pinch at the top there, and just pull, and the strands come out really nicely, and then you can separate them out in the normal way. I'm not sponsored, by the way, by Cottage Garden Threads. I've never interacted with them as a company. I just like their products. They've got the most beautiful colour range, and you can get them in lots of places in the UK. So I've got 2 strands here. Let's start with that. I should also say, you can probably tell by the running stitch, I have now stitched this onto my batting. So just like in all my panels, I've cut a piece of batting and I've just running stitched around the border. So I positioned my aperture. I had a couple of questions last week about this, so let me just explain. This is just an aperture. I got a piece of black A4 paper out of a sketch pad that had black paper in it, and I cut a hole in the centre of it that matched the size of the panels that I am creating. The long part of it is 24 centimetres and the short is 16. If you want that in inches, I need a different gadget. So in inches, that is 9.5 inches by 6.25 inches. So that's the size of panel, and the fabric that I use always has overhang to allow for shrinkage depending on how much I stitch on this. The fabric itself won't shrink, but as we stitch it pulls the fabric in, and so it will be, if you start with a panel that's the right size, it will not end up the right size. So I cut a little aperture, and that just helps me frame my panels. So I just laid it on until I was happy with the location of the frame. I wanted a bit of sky above the trees. I quite liked the way that batik had worked just above the trees, so that's where I positioned it. I drew around the inside, laid my fabric onto my batting, and then just stitched around the outline. You can see my different attempts. It's fine, it's a water erase pen. I will spray it and it will disappear. So I've attached it to the batting. What that's going to do is help me get lots of texture into the design. So as I start stitching now, these pieces, these 2 fabrics are going to pull together, and that batting is going to create a lovely quilted feel. So seed stitch is where I'm going to start, and seed stitch we just do, it's like running stitch but not in a line. So we're just going to make small stitches that go in different directions, and I've got 2 tips for seed stitch. One is don't knot your thread, so I tend to make a stitch and then come up halfway along that stitch and make my next stitch going in a different direction. So if you're always starting perpendicular to your previous stitch, it helps you keep your stitches random. I don't want these super close together, and I'm always going to stitch into a space on my work. So that's my first tip. It's actually much harder than you expect it to be to keep it random. It's not straightforward. Being deliberately random is actually really hard. So another tip to help you keep everything random is to every now and again rotate your work. So sometimes you'll be working with it the right way up, sometimes it will be upside down, and that means that if you accidentally fall into patterns as you stitch, so you will naturally take your needle in certain directions. If you rotate your work, those natural directions will be facing a different way. So it helps everything to be more random. This is going to be a really abstract postcard, fabric postcard, and hopefully this is going to be a really relaxing one to stitch. So you could put on an audio book, put on a TV series. Always happy for recommendations of box sets to binge watch while I'm stitching, or audio books. Books that I've listened to recently is I've read, what have I read? You know about Haggitude. I've talked about that one already. That was just a brilliant read. Another non-fiction book is The Dance of the Dissident Daughter by Sue Monk Kidd. Read that. If you want a novel, Lessons in Chemistry, I can't recommend that enough. Absolutely loved it. It's poignant and tragic. It's essentially about a chemist who's a woman who becomes a TV cook, and it's a love story, it's a tragedy, it's triumphant, utterly joyful. You will rattle through it in no time at all. Also really enjoyed Tom Lake. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's, if you listen to it on Audible, it's read by Meryl Streep, and I love that voice casting because it's about a woman who's an actor and who is very successful and who leaves that world behind and is retelling the story of her journey to fame to her own daughters during COVID. So the whole sort of concept of the narrative is beautiful. It's family and it's about legacy, and again it's kind of a love story, but it's about choice. Basically it's about women being able to choose the life that they want, and it's a celebration of family and a celebration of success, and it asks the question about what makes a successful life. Is success measured in money or something else? It's just fabulous. So Tom Lake, I would recommend. I read the new one by Celeste Ng, which is called Missing Hearts. I think that one is called, and that's about art being used as protest, and it's about loss, and it's that is a real tearjerker, so that I can recommend as well. And my book of the last 12 months, the book of the year for me so far, which it's going to be really hard to beat, is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I feel choked up even just talking about it. It blew my mind. It's a debut novel, and I feel like it has the potential to be a bit of a To Kill a Mockingbird for Gen X. So I am absolutely Generation X through and through. Born in 1975, bang in the middle of Generation X. And it it is a love story to our lives, really, our generation. And it's about computer games, and it's about love and friendship and sticking with one another through the most difficult times. It's about disability. It covers so much ground, but it is an absolute work of art, and I'm positively evangelical about that book. Feel like anybody born between 1960 and 1985, it should be compulsory reading. So they're my book recommendations. If you have watched something or read it and you think I would like it, do let me know in the comments. What's your favourite thing to listen to while you're stitching or watch? I would absolutely love to know. I've also retraced. I feel like I missed out because I just missed it, and I've had to go back. But I recently watched Gilmore Girls for the first time. Loved it. Lorelai is the kind of character I wish I was, but if you've never watched Gilmore Girls, I do recommend. I wasn't so much of a fan of the reboot, but I just think the characters are fabulous, and I'm quite certain it's not, but it's how I, in my world of fantasy, imagine small town American life to be. I'm sure it isn't. I'm sure it's how most people in small town America wish small town America was as well, but I really enjoyed that. So yeah, any recommendations, send them my way in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear what's worth watching or listening to. I listen to a lot of music as well while I'm stitching. So I've been listening to, I don't know, I've just gone on a bit of a Hans Zimmer thing at the moment. So I've been listening to I know it's bizarre, I've been listening to the soundtrack of Interstellar, kind of on repeat, like a total weirdo. Does anybody else listen to film music, or is it just me? um, Maybe don't answer that. I I don't know. It makes me relive the movie, which we watched recently. Again, it's one of those films that I feel like I need to come back to almost monthly. It's just so beautiful, and I'll put Arrival in that category as well. I really love sci-fi. So yeah, lots of things that I do while stitching. Obviously, I spend a lot of time sewing these days, but that's kind of what I get up to. So do share. Let's share the wealth. If you've read or watched or listened to something really excellent, stick it in the comments and let's share. Give each other a virtual hug, and let's start our own little book club or binge watch club. So hopefully you get the idea of what I'm doing. I've prattled on for a good amount of time there, and I think there's only so much prattling you will tolerate. If you don't like listening to me ramble on, by the way, You can always fast forward, change the speed setting, and you whiz through this a lot quicker. Now, what I wanted to try and show you by stitching as I was chatting is that this is going to take some time. So I've been my timestamp on my recording says 22 minutes at the moment, almost 23 minutes, and I know I talked about the thread initially as well, but I've only covered that amount of ground, and so it is going to take a bit of time to do this, but I'm hoping that this is a month where all of us can find a bit of time to just do some restful stitching. So I'm going to fill in the rest of that, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do with the rocks. Cue up your audio book or your box set, and off you go and stitch your seed stitch beach. Right, so I've put in my seed stitch and I'm really liking the variegation, but I really like the way the watery marks of the batik show through, and it's definitely working to mitigate some of that bleed that happened while I was doing batik. So I've got some of my Anchor beige pearl cotton. I thought we could have a go at some of the rocks. I've also got some of this sand dune as well that I'm going to put in just to vary them a little bit. I'm going to do some blanket stitch wheels, and these aren't going to be particularly regular because the shape of the rocks is uneven. So I've come up on the outside edge of the rock and I'm going to go down at the point where the different rocks meet. Then I can come back up at the edge with my needle going over that working thread, and when I pull through, that forms my blanket stitch. Might have made that a little bit big, but it's okay. So I want my thread to go in the direction I'm heading. I'm going to go back down at the point where my first stitch went down, at the point between the rocks, and I come back up at the edge with my needle passing over the thread. So I'm working blanket stitch, but I'm rotating around that centre point. It's really important that you don't pull too tight because your fabric will bunch up and pucker. So back down at the centre, up at the edge, and pull through. So we're creating that. I'm stitching rocks, but they'll look quite shell-like as well, so I think that's nicely in keeping, even though this isn't a beach, it's a lake, but I think it'll work quite nicely. Now you can make these quite circular, but obviously if you go off at angles it's going to be a more sort of angular rock shape. So just make my fan of blanket stitches there, and when I'm finished I hop over the last stitch and put in a little anchor stitch on the back, and there we've got our blanket stitch wheel, and again I can see the watery batik through on the surface. So I think I'll probably finish the thread each time on these, just because the trailing threads are going to be quite cumbersome on the back if I don't. I really like that, just making sure I haven't pulled too tight. You can just get your needle under the stitches. There will be a bit of puffiness because of the quilting, but if you just give your stitches a little pull, it's a balancing act to get them tight enough that they sit nicely on the surface, but not so tight that your fabric bunches up. So I'm going to put the rest of those in. Obviously they'll get bigger the closer they get to the foreground. I'll blend in some of this thread as well. So the rocks are coming next. Okay, here's my rocks. I think that looks just really fab. Love that, and I think it's going to frame very well indeed. I love the watery tones underneath the stitching. I think it's working a treat. So I want to work on the trees now, and I'm going to start just by outlining the shapes. So this is just a heat erase pen, and it's going to help me confine any stitching I do to the shapes that I intended there to be. So I've just got some spaces to work with, and I think I'm going to do French knots in this. So I've got some of my variegated green. This is the MC 4045 if you're interested. If you don't know about French knots, I have brought my thread through. I'm going to hold it taut towards me, sit the needle on the top, and then I'm going to wrap my thread over the top a couple of times. Then I take the needle back down close to, but not in exactly the same place that the thread came up. And the trick with a French knot is to keep tension on this working thread all the time. So that makes the wrap slide down to the surface of the fabric, and then you pull through. So I'll show you that again. Thread through, hold it towards myself, needle on top. We're going to wrap over the needle a few times. Take the needle back down close to where it came up. Keep that thread taut so that the wraps sit on the surface, and keep tension on that thread the whole time until it pulls through. So I'm just going to scatter some French knots around. Now this is one of the threads that fades quite gradually. So French knot's quite a good stitch for this because it is quite thread hungry. It's surprisingly thread hungry because you've got all those wraps on the surface. It's going to gobble up quite a lot of thread. I'm quite liking how textural this piece is. It's fun, I think, and has so far been really mindful. Just able to sit and stitch without a huge amount of thought. Can just enjoy putting textures on. So these are just my suggestions of stitches. You could do whatever stitches you like on your background, whatever works. And if you don't fancy doing the batik, you could just paint a design on your backing fabric, or you could collage it with different batik fabrics if you happen to have some in your stash, or just any fabrics if you don't have batiks. So there are other ways of doing this panel if you didn't fancy the batik approach. We're starting to get some variation in those greens now. So I love the fact that you get that variegated colour without any thought or planning. It just happens, and it will work out however it works out. And I may do each section of the tree in. I might put in some other green variegations. I do have quite a few variegated greens, so I think it will help keep each section of the tree separate from the others. Now when you are using heat erase pen with a textured stitch like this, normally you see me iron away the marks. I will get rid of the heat erase pen when I finish stitching, but obviously I don't want to crush my French knots, so I will use a hairdryer. Hairdryers work on heat erase pen as well. So there you go, hopefully you can see the variegation there that is building. So that's my next job, French knots across the trees. Right, so that's my trees in, and now I'm going to work on the bushes that are along here. I've been thinking about it. Originally I planned to do some little chain stitches. Let's see how that looks, and I might combine it with some cross stitch. I'm just not loving it, and I think my issue with it is that the proportion is too big. Because this is meant to be the distance, these just seem too defined, so I'm going to just take that out. I do quite like the texture of that, so I might have to use this somewhere else. I wonder whether there's something better to use here. So I don't know if you can see, I've sketched in some lines, and I'm thinking that I'm going to do some lines of running stitch here. Two reasons. I think we need to echo these arcs at the bottom, but I also think that proportionally the stitches will be less of a feature if we do it like this, and so it'll help this greenery to recede into the background. And this is like the ultimate slow stitch, doing lines of running stitch, and I'm going to keep them about 1/8 of an inch apart. Not going to worry about marrying up the stitches because it will get harder and harder as we get closer to the centre. So I'm just working in lines, and hopefully this will really show up the gradient really nicely. So I've been thinking as I've been stitching this, it's a little bit like Zentangle, which is adding patterns into shapes essentially. So sometimes using colour, but mostly using black ink to doodle. It's another mindfulness technique to doodle lines and patterns within shapes to create a design, and this is, I suppose, the stitch equivalent of adding patterns and shapes to add texture and just do a mindful doodle. So like I say, you could do any stitches that you like, anything that you enjoy stitching that's fairly automatic, that you don't have to think too much about. I wouldn't try any of the more intricate stitches for this. You just want something really simple and relaxing that is going to be pleasant and enjoyable and relaxing. You don't want anything that's going to create stress. There we go. So I'm going to add some more of those. I might actually start my next bush or hill from within that one, so there's a bit of crossover. I think that might look quite nice. So I'm going to stitch those in and then we'll come back and look at how it's looking so far. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it today. We've done our blanket stitch wheels in the rocks, we've done seed stitch on the beach, I've done my running stitch arcs, which I'm actually really pleased with. I think that's a much better solution. And then our French knot tree. So if I just pop the aperture over the top, that gives you a bit of a sense of how that's looking, and I'm really liking that. You can see what I meant, by the way, about shrinkage. So as we've stitched, that aperture that was the perfect size now is a little bit too small, which is fine because we can use that bottom corner and we've still got space around here. So as long as we keep an eye on that, it will be absolutely fine. So I'm really liking the way this is shaping up. I love the fact that we can still see the watery batik underneath. We're not losing that. So next week we'll work on the water and sky, and need to do something with our tree trunks as well. So I hope you'll join me for that. Can't wait to see what you create. Do share your pieces at hashtag FSH Winging It 24 if you're sharing on Instagram, but we also have a private Facebook group and I'll put details of that in the description below, so you can always post your work there. There's some amazing pieces of embroidery and textile art on there from people that have been following this project, so do join and take a look. I'll link some other videos over here and the Winging It 2024 playlist down here so that you can watch all the videos in this series, and I will see you next week for the next part of our July panel. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon. Bye.